I was about 13 years old when my family went to stay at a resort called the Plastic Flower for the summer. From the very start, it was a bizarre experience. I remember it like it was a dream. Waking up to my mom saying, "Time to go, dear." Out the window of our city apartment, I could see a taxi parked on the street. It looked old-fashioned, like a drawing of a taxi in an Addams Family comic strip, all pointy and black. My family were the type to always take us kids on weird, extravagant adventures with no warning. I was used to being woken up in the middle of the night for a sudden trip to the Bahamas, or taken out of school to go to a fashion show in Paris. I already had a small travel bag for occasions such as this. My family walked out of the apartment to the waiting taxi. The windows were blacked out so we couldn't see the driver. I looked around at us all. My mother, Yasmin, and her brothers Abe and Casper, along with my twin brother Darius, were all walking out the front door with their suitcases. I felt the usual exasperation in my chest. "Where's old mother?" I said. This was our name for our grandmother. "She didn't want to come," said Uncle Abe as he knocked on the driver's window. The boot lifted open, and Uncle Casper helped stack our luggage inside. Then we all piled into the back seat, squashed up together. There was a screen that blocked the view of the driver. "Where are we going?" Darius asked. Our mother smiled gleefully, placing a hand to her heart. "Oh, lovely resort in the countryside," she said. "I got a pamphlet in the mail and it reminded me of Mallory Towers, this beautiful old house by the beach. Just gorgeous. It's called the Plastic Flower. There'll be other children for you to play with too, my dears." My mom often talked to us like we were toddlers instead of teenagers. The last thing I remembered before I fell asleep again was the vehicle driving through the archway at the end of our street and suddenly realizing the driver was following another identical black taxi. Old mother, a bespectacled woman with her black hair always in a bun, had made a fortune developing a world-renowned fashion house, the most elite of society clamoring to wear her clothes. After old father died, she turned away from the spotlight and locked herself up in her apartment with her triplets and grandchildren. My Uncle Abe, a small man with slicked black hair who wore loud gold suits, had taken over most of the duties of the fashion house as old mother was getting on in years. My Uncle Casper, who was large and muscular, was a drag queen known as Cassandra, and my mother, petite and doughy-eyed, ran the nightclub he performed in. My mom didn't know who our father was, telling Darius and I when we were 10 that we were conceived during an orgy. Darius was lanky, had his hair dyed fire engine red, and liked to wear goth makeup and clothes. Well, I was stockier and tended to present myself in a more casual type of hoodies and shorts. I woke in the taxi, feeling cramped and stiff. My family was waking up around me. We were driving down a dirt road through a forest, lush, green with wildflowers dotting the roadside. We were approaching a house on a grassy hill, only one story with white walls and a terracotta roof. At the bottom of the hill was the seaside, the waves lapping serenely at the white sand. I was a bit surprised. This place seemed a bit too ordinary for my family's taste, but I immediately preferred it to the grand hotels and resorts we usually stayed in. It was very cozy looking. The taxi pulled up to an area of gravel in front of the front door. We all got out as the boot of the car cracked open. Uncle Casper got all the bags as Mom and Uncle Abe walked ahead towards the house. Darius and I helped Uncle Casper with the luggage before we made our way inside. When we walked in, Darius and I immediately stopped, looked around with complete amusement. We were in a foyer, the ceiling stretching above us, all latticed and intricately detailed. There was an arched door made of oak in front of us, and we could hear faint laughter and chattering behind it. On either side of the oak door, were two circular holes covered with black vinyl flaps and a set of gold tracks that connected them. To our left and right were long corridors, the floors all decoratively tiled, the windows letting in light. "It's too big," said Darius. The foyer alone looked larger than the whole building from the outside. The adults ignored us, smiling around at the place as Uncle Casper put down the bags. "Looks just divine, doesn't it?" said Uncle Abe. There was movement at the corridor to the left, and Darius and I looked around. Another girl was there. She was squat and sulky looking, and was around our age but dressed much younger in a pinafore dress, white stockings, Mary Jane shoes, and a bow in her bobbed black hair. I noticed the dress was from my family's fashion label. She must have been rich. We were both a bit too shy to introduce ourselves, so we just awkwardly ignored each other. Ahead of us, the triplets had found an old-fashioned television up against the wall. It turned itself on at their approach. "It's so retro," Uncle Casper said delightedly. "Total vintage vibes." "I know, isn't it just the cutest?" my mother replied. "Hush," said Uncle Abe, flapping his hand at his siblings. "We're going to miss what it's saying." We watched as a rainbow grew across the black static-filled screen and swirled around like a snake's tail. Then a woman grew from the end of the rainbow in a long, dark pink dress with heavy sleeves. She had strawberry blonde hair and an alarming smile on her paper-white face, mouth fixed, lips stretched and teeth shining. A sliver of unease went through me. Something must have been wrong with the television. Her eyes looked like silver coins engraved with two crosses. "Welcome," the lady in the rainbow said in a soft, sweet, and smooth voice that reminded me of strawberry ice cream. "Here at the Plastic Flower, you can do whatever your heart desires. My associates and I will always be around to help you with whatever you need." In a glitter of rainbow light, two men appeared on either side of her. They looked similar to each other with thick, red, frowning mouths, paper white skin, and the same silver crossed eyes as the lady in the rainbow. The one on the left was tall, thin with a wild black cloud of hair, wearing a top hat and a ruffled black suit. The one on the right was short and overweight with 3 tufts of blonde hair on his head, wearing dirty shorts and a singlet with his beer gut hanging out. "Just give us a call and we'll be there," said the lady in the rainbow. "Feel free to swim in our lovely beach, explore our forests, or shop till you drop in our shopping center. Enjoy your stay. You'll never want to leave." The TV flickered, and the woman shrunk back into a rainbow. Reversing over the black screen, the two men disappearing with a sparkle. Darius and I exchanged confused looks. A shopping center? How could a shopping center fit in this place? "How lovely," my mother said to us. "You've made a little friend already." She smiled at the strange girl beside us. "What's your name, dear?" "Lucy Moon." The girl replied, and the triplets' faces brightened. "Any relation to Moon Jewelry?" asked Uncle Abe, and Lucy nodded. "Tell your parents hello when you see them," said Uncle Abe. "We always have our models in their products. Absolutely divine." Lucy's face shifted, and she looked between my mother and uncle's, slowly recognizing who we were. "Well, have fun," said Mom. "We're going to go check out the shopping center. You can amuse yourselves, dears." The triplets walked for the oak door, disappearing into the darkness behind it. They'd left their bags behind for us to look after. Lucy looked us up and down. Darius was silent, but I decided to try to be friendly and sent her a little wave. "Hi," I said to her. "This is my twin Darius, and my name is Salam, but everyone calls me Sally." Lucy stared at us with shrewd, narrow eyes. "If your parents are so rich and famous, why do they let you look like that?" she asked, and then pointed to Darius. "You look like a Tim Burton drawing of a raccoon. And you've got a bowl cut and a $5 outfit." We just stared at her, shocked into silence by her rudeness. Old Mother believed in teaching her grandkids the value of money. She said she'd been too hands-off with the triplets, throwing nannies and gifts at them, and now they were shallow and materialistic. We did chores to earn pocket money, were grounded to get jobs after school, and always bought our own stuff, including clothes. I wasn't very interested in fashion and just got whatever was on the clearance rack. The triplets disapproved of all this, and their spontaneous holidays, where old mother wasn't invited, was their childish rebellion against her. My parents wouldn't let me out of the house looking like you two, Lucy's son. They've got pride, but I guess that's because we're not Nauvoo riche like your trashy family. With that, she walked off on us. I wanted to point out that at least I was dressed my age and not like an overgrown toddler, but she was already off around the corner. Charming, said Darius, and I bit a smile back. I could see down the corridor, tags hanging off the door handles, each one displaying the names of our family. I went over and picked up my tag, turning it around to see a door pass attached. I opened up my door to see a cozy room with a plush bed covered in colorful cushions and a large wardrobe to hang my clothes. Darius and I started hefting the bags over to each of our family's rooms. Then we just stood around the corridor trying to think of what to do to entertain ourselves. A door opened somewhere around the corner, and Lucy came skulking out, carrying a towel and dressed in a swimsuit, no doubt heading for the beach. She sneered at us, and we ignored her. I don't know what to do, said Darius. Maybe I'll just take a nap or something. Suddenly there was a magnified sound that filled up the corridor like it was coming through an intercom, making us all jump. It was a horrible slobbering as though someone was choking on their own spit. Then there was angry muffled murmuring and the clunk of someone grabbing at the speaker. What do you like? An awful high-pitched voice shouted. What do you like? Answer, answer. Again there was a knocking sound and a commotion of huffing and snarling as the speaker was wrestled free. So sorry. The familiar voice of the lady in the rainbow said, Please tell us what activity you'd like to participate in, and we'd happily oblige you. We three kids just exchanged looks. What the hell was all that other noise about? I could feel the unease that had just been a seed in my chest when I first got here start to blossom larger, spreading its poison tendrils through my body. Said Darius finally. I could watch a movie. A door at the end of the corridor opened, and the smell of buttered popcorn wafted over us from the darkness. Anything you want, the woman said. Darius hesitated then moved for the door. I want to go swimming at the beach, said Lucy at once. Of course, there's a path out the back of this building that will lead the way, said the voice. Behind us in the foyer, the front doors creaked open, a sea breeze blowing down the corridor. Lucy ran off. And last, but certainly not least, what is it that you desire? Said the voice to me. I guess I'm a bit hungry, I murmured under my breath, her soothing voice not doing anything for my nerves. What is your most favorite of food? She asked me. It shall be provided to you. My mind instantly jumped to having tea in old mother's parlor. She made delicious scones with jam and cream, little sandwiches, sugar biscuits, and the nicest tea I'd ever had. Tea and scones with sugar biscuits, please, I said. As you wish, said the strawberry ice cream voice. A door down the other end of the corridor opened. I walked towards it. Inside, I took a seat at a table with a 3-tiered platter and a chintz tea set. Through a big bay window overlooking the beach, I could see Lucy running gleefully across the sand, splashing in the water. I poured myself a cup of tea and picked up a scone, along with the little saucers of cream and jam. Taking a bite, I watched the waves crashing on the sand outside the window. The tea and finger food was delicious, made to perfection. Not as nice as old mother's, obviously, but of course we all tend to prefer the food we grew up on. I remember being in the parlor in our city apartment, in comfortable armchairs. Old mother refilling our cups with piping hot tea. When I was your age, she'd say as we sipped from our cups. My mother had me running around at the tea shop, serving the customers. I was supposed to run the place when she died, be a nice, plump woman in an apron and hairnet with flour on my nose. I horrified her when I got into the whorish fashion instead. I enjoyed listening to her stories. I'm not much good at anything else but listening to people. I like hearing people talk about themselves, especially old mother. I didn't get to spend much alone time with the adults in my family. The triplets just took us on expensive holidays. I think we were more like handbag chihuahuas to them. Cute accessories to take around. Show off and coo at, but not emotionally connect with. Lucy had stopped running around and was now standing stock still, staring at something in the distance. I looked over and saw one of the men from the welcome video, the shorter, fatter one, over by the path that led to the beach. He was boggling at Lucy, slack-jawed, drool running down his chin. There hadn't been a problem with the television. His eyes were silver coins with cross engravings. Lucy walked backwards into the ocean, swimming further and further out, not taking her eyes off the man. He was completely still for a few moments and then turned around. I felt a jolt of terror in my chest. Could he see me through the window? The man didn't spot me. He just wandered off down the beach path towards the forest, arms dangling loosely by his sides. My heart was still thumping, my skin cold and clammy. What was that? Was he some kind of pervert? I looked out at the ocean, Lucy's dark head bobbing in the water. She swam back towards the shore, picking up her towel and bolted for the house again. When she made it inside, I heard her cry out in a frightened voice, "Mom? Dad?" She ran down the corridor, disappearing away into the depths of the house. The whole experience had put me off of the food. I got up and hurried out. I peered up and down the corridor, feeling my stomach shake. When I saw the coast was clear, I bolted for my room. I pulled out my old stuffed toy crocodile that I'd had since I was a toddler. Inside the toy's head, hidden among the fluff, was a switchblade. Old mother had gifted us the weapons to me and Darius at a young age. The celebrity world is full of rich perverts who get away with all kinds of depravity. She said, "You can't depend on your mother or uncles to protect you. Anyone tries anything, you go straight for the eyes." After a while of watching the door, I found myself growing tired, still carrying my plush crocodile. I climbed into my pajamas and dressing gown, sitting on my bed. I didn't want to fall asleep, but my eyelids were heavy, my body fighting against me. I'd take a quick nap, and by the time I woke up, the triplets were sure to be back. Gripping my secret weapon, I dropped off to sleep. I dreamed of a black void with a pink light glowing in the distance. There was a creaking sound. My eyes flew open, my stomach dropping and my skin going cold. Moonlight was shining through the window, illuminating a figure bent over at the foot of my bed. The tall, thin man with the black hair and the ruffled suit and top hat was going through my bag. He pulled out my brush and untangled some of the hair from the bristles. He spotted me, and his silver coin eyes glinted. "My brother eat the hair," he said in the high-pitched voice that I had heard over the intercom earlier. "I not eat hair. Disgusting." He shoved the black hair into his pocket. "I prefer the special blood," he said. "Do you bleed yet? Put the cotton thingies in the bin so I can have them. Nice to chew on." I screamed, making the man jump and shrink back. "Mom?" I wailed with terror. The man's face furrowed with confusion, putting his hands up to his ears. "Why are you screaming?" he said. "I just make a conversation." I jumped out of bed and ran for the door, still wailing at the top of my lungs. Tears pouring down my face, I bolted down the corridor towards the foyer. Sitting by the big oak door was Darius and Lucy, both in their pajamas too. They looked up at me as I ran over. "There's a man in my room," I gasped out, fear and adrenaline coursing through my body. "This place is fucked," said Darius, eyes flickering around. I was in the cinema, and I felt something picking at my head. I turned around, and it was that fat guy. He was putting my hair in his mouth. I shivered as I sat down beside him. It was nighttime, and the adults hadn't returned. Through the big arched door, we could hear faint laughter and chattering. "I bet it's like the end of society happening in there," said Darius. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Darius sent me a condescending smile. "It's a really underground film. Barely anyone knows about it," he replied, and I rolled my eyes. Darius was fine most of the time, but he had a pretentious, hipster side of him that annoyed the crap out of me. Lucy was eyeing the toy crocodile I was carrying with a look of contempt on her face. "You still have stuffed animals?" she said. "That's so babyish." I couldn't believe she'd make fun of something so trivial when we were all being terrorized by creepy men in a strange house with all of our parents missing. Her priorities were completely warped. "Have you seen Mom or the uncles at all?" I asked Darius, who shook his head. "My parents will be back soon," Lucy said, looking down her nose at us. "Maybe yours don't care about you, but mine do." We ignored her. I felt a sick jolt go through me, my heart panging painfully in my throat. Something was moving out of the vinyl flaps to the right of us and onto the wall. For a moment, I had no clue what it was as we moved back all at once. It looked like a shadow of a humongous creature. We heard a clanking, clattering sound coming from the same direction. The vinyl flaps were pushed open as a cart with a man inside came rattling across the tracks towards us. The man, old and frail with wild gray hair, dark wrinkled skin and black sunglasses, peered at us for a moment as if he was struggling to make a sound. "Where's the dragon?" he yelled. "Where'd the dragon go?" We looked up at the shadow on the wall. I realized it was a painting of a curling, writhing, traditional Japanese dragon with a gaping maw and a huge mane. It was moving towards the other vinyl entrance to the left. The old man gestured at us with a gnarled hand. "Get in the trolley quick," he said. "This is a dangerous place. I can get you back home again." We stared at him, more frightened than ever. Stranger danger blared in my mind. I felt completely unsafe at this resort and wanted to go home, but I'd be the dumbest kid around to just jump in this man's trolley. "Quickly," said the old man as the cart traveled across the tracks towards the second set of vinyl flaps. The dragon had disappeared inside it. "My parents told me to never go anywhere with strangers," said Lucy. "They'll be back any second now, and they'll call the police on you for being a creep." There was a rough coughing sound from behind us, and we jumped around. In the doorway was the overweight, blond man with coins for eyes. He was making a gagging, choking sound, slobber dribbling down his chin. Sticking his fingers clumsily into his mouth, he started pulling out clumps of matted saliva-soaked hair, black and fire engine red from the depths of his throat with horrible heaving gasps. Darius screamed in horror as I staggered back and Lucy let out a cry. "Come on already," cried the old man, his cart beginning to slide through the vinyl flaps. Between the two, I knew who seemed more terrifying. We all ran to clamber inside the cart. As we rolled across the tracks, I watched the gagging man in the doorway, our combined hair oozing down his front as he watched us leave. The cart was rolling down a hallway that seemed never-ending, the tracks stretching out over a red velvet floor. The ceiling was looming above us, and on the walls were huge oil paintings in gilded frames. The paintings depicted the three people we'd seen in the introduction video over and over again. The strawberry blonde woman dancing around or posing happily with her fixed smile. The tall skinny man glaring out at us, and the short overweight man blank-faced and drooling. In the light we could see the dragon shape more clearly. It was a moving painting on the wall, all in shades of red with a mane and black snarling lips. The old man jumped out of the trolley with surprising speed and pounced at the painting. We stared as he took a little container out of his pocket, pulling out a wad of melted substance I didn't recognize. He shoved the substance into the painted dragon's mouth. The painting froze on the spot. Then after a few seconds, the man pulled the substance out again. I realized it was melted wax that he'd shoved into a keyhole in the dragon's mouth. Now he had an imprint of the key shape. As soon as he took the wax imprint out, the dragon quivered and then went dancing up the wall, disappearing into the darkness. The old man went back to sit with us in the trolley. "My name's Lennox," said the old man, and we didn't reply, just huddled together like scared kittens. "You can call me Baba, though," he said. I stared up at the oil paintings we were passing. One was of the whole trio together. The two men on either side of the woman, their arms around each other. The men looked as dour as ever. The woman's face disturbingly gleeful. "We don't know their names," said Baba Lennox, noticing where I was looking. "We call the brothers Rawhead and Bloody Bones." "That's a song," Darius said at once. "You probably haven't heard of them. The band's called Sucks, Sucks, and the Banshees." Baba Lennox blinked at him. "No, they were named after the old nursery rhyme," he said. "Rawhead and Bloody Bones steal naughty children from their homes, takes them to their dirty den, then they're never seen again. Rawhead's the fat one who eats hair. Bloody Bones is the one who, well, the one who..." He shivered uncomfortably as Darius peered at him with confusion. "Bloody Bones came into my room and asked if I was on my period yet because he wanted to chew on the dirty tampons," I said. Darius let out a horrified groan and Lucy shuddered. "Steal naughty children?" Lucy said. "What do you mean by that? Have we been kidnapped?" I thought, feeling a sick chill go through me. Baba Lennox shrugged uncertainly. "I have no idea what's happening in the Plastic Flower Resort. I just know that this whole place is goddamn deranged," he said. We huddled in together even more. I could hear my own harsh breathing in my throat, and I squeezed my fusty, old, toy crocodile tighter. We were passing a painting of the woman, looming nearly to the ceiling, her arms outstretched in a rainbow over her head, her silver coin eyes staring off into the distance. "The woman we call Regina." "That's a song too," Darius interrupted. "By the Sugar Cubes. That was Jork's band before she went solo and got famous." "No," Baba Lennox said, starting to look irritated with him. "We named her that because Regina means queen, and she seems to be the leader of the whole place." Darius went quiet, and I squeezed his arm. I knew he tended to info dump whenever he was nervous. "How do you plan on getting us out of here?" Lucy demanded. The car was beginning to turn, and I could see we were heading for a dip that led downwards into a dark tunnel. Baba Lennox held on to the sides as we began to roll down. There were no paintings or carpets here, just darkness, the rush of wind and clattering, mechanical sounds all around us. "Follow the dragon," said Baba Lennox's voice through the pitch blackness. "One day the door in the dragon's mouth was open, so I walked in," he said. "There was a hallway and I saw it led outside. I almost made it when the brothers caught me and everything went black. I woke up in my resort bed again. I tried escaping first through the forest and then down the dirt road, and I always got chased down by one of the brothers in a black taxi, dragging me back. There's no going home. We're trapped here like animals, and I don't know why. We need to escape before we end up finding out in the worst way possible what they're keeping us here for." Down below us, we saw a flashing rainbow sign. As the cart grew closer, I could see it read, "Welcome friends to the Plastic Flower Shopping Center. Stay a while. You need to remember whatever you do to follow the dragon," said Baba Lennox. "Follow the dragon. If we get separated, don't forget it." We were fast approaching the neon sign. With a crash, we went through another set of vinyl flaps. the cart rattling over the golden tracks. As we got out, I was immediately hit by a complete sensory overload. The shopping center was shadowy. The marble floors reflected dozens of multicolored neon lights from glistening storefronts with shiny trinkets in the front windows. The halls bustling with the dark shapes of chattering, laughing people, constant music blasting over the speakers, the smell of cooking foods, an array of different spices and sugars, all mixed up together in my nose. My head hurt instantly. Not knowing where to look, too much to try to process all at once. It was an utter attack to the senses. Hanging from the ceiling was a huge screen, flashing rainbow colors. On it was Regina, dancing to the music thrumming from the speakers. Occasionally the screen would split into dozens of little Reginas, or change with a star or wipe transition. Dance, get down, have fun, come on. Regina's voice was singing along to the music. I could hear the vibrations thumping in my head. Every now and again she would say, "We hope you enjoy your stay at the Plastic Flower. Feel free to ask for help anytime you do, please." I was reminded of an 80s aerobic video. "I'll just be a second," said Baba Lennox. "I'm getting the keys cut." We followed him out of the trolley, standing awkwardly together, watching the cart travel slowly towards another set of flaps in the wall, no doubt to go back up towards the main house again. I watched as the man tottered over towards a news agency in between a hair salon and a beautician's. Despite moving so fast before, now Baba Lennox was walking like he was a frail old man. I realized it was an act so not to draw attention. I saw there was a stall in the middle of the floor, bottles glistening with black, gray, and white liquid, specked with glitter behind the glass on the shelves. An old woman was standing in the center of the shelves, smiling at me. She was skeletal with long dyed red hair and bright red lipstick, wearing a long lacy black dress. She beckoned at me with a gnarled finger. I tried to ignore her, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the bottles. The liquid inside was gently fizzing and hissing, changing shades and swirling all deep, dark, and fascinating. I couldn't help it. I was drawn over. "What are they?" I asked, peering through the glass. "Potions, honey. That can give you any type of ability you desire," said the woman in a rough voice like she ate cigarettes for every meal. "Handmade by my lovely self, the Lady Kalptra." My heart fluttered. Half of me didn't believe her. She must have been some snake oil or MLM type, trying to sell me useless crap. The other half of me was enthralled. I was a nobody with nothing interesting about me. Bland as a slice of bread. Not like Darius with his goth fashion and vast knowledge of music and films. Just one potion, and I could be less boring, less dull. But it was just liquid. Nothing I could drink could make me smarter, or funnier, or interesting. It was a scam. I noticed behind me. Darius was drawn over to the hair salon and Lucy gasped and walked away down the hall. I wondered what it was that had caught her interest. "Don't cost much." The Lady Kalptra rasped with a hint of desperation in her voice. "All I need in payment is a bit of blood. Just a drop." A flash of memory like a shot of disgusting medicine in my mind, of bloody bones at the foot of my bed, asking whether I bled yet. Cringing, I turned away from the woman. I went over to Lucy as the Lady Kalptra let out a curse of frustration. Built into the wall was a long towering tank full of dark water. Lucy was standing transfixed, a look of childlike glee on her face. "Look," she breathed at me with delight. I stared inside. A beautiful hazel-eyed woman was swimming gracefully through the water, her long green scaled fish tail wiggling, her blonde hair billowing behind her. She smiled and waved at us. Lucy clasped her hands under her chin. "You know, some people become professional mermaid models," I said. "That'd be your kind of thing, wouldn't it? You like the beach and all that." Lucy's face changed, the childlike awe falling away until she was sullen and nasty looking again. I am expected to run my family's esteemed jewelry business as an adult, not waste my time on the beach taking mermaid photos like some kind of idiot. She snapped at me. I sent her an exasperated look. Just trying to make conversation, jeez. I shot at her before walking off. I went over to see what my twin was up to. Darius was looking through hair products as a blonde teenage girl beside him read the back of a can of hairspray. Another teenage girl with dyed pink space buns was napping in one of the swivel chairs next to a mirror. Darius picked up something with interest. It was a Russian nesting doll, painted in swirling blues with a little blue-eyed, blonde-haired face peeling up at us. He unscrewed it, taking all the smaller dolls out, lining them up next to each other. "Where do you pay?" he asked the blonde teen. "It's free," she said. "I guess it comes with the entry payment or something. I don't know." Darius and I exchanged confused looks before he put the doll back together and slipped it in his pajama pant pocket with a shrug. The blonde girl turned to me. "You pissed off the Lady Kelpatra," she said. "She's not lying, you know. Those potions really are magic." I must have looked disbelieving because the blonde girl puffed up with indignation. "I'll prove it," she said. She waved her hand over her head. Suddenly, out of thin air, a black and white kitten appeared, falling down into the teenager's hands with a meow. She grinned, giving it a scratch behind the ears. Darius and I boggled at her. She threw the cat into the air, and it disappeared with a pop again. "That's my cat from back home," she said. "I can teleport any animal you want right here, as long as I've seen it before. Just a photo on your phone will do it." She peered out the window into the beauticians. Inside were another pair of teenage girls. One of them was writing on a mirror with lipstick the same name over and over again. Nalani Nakamura. Nalani Nakamura. "She does that because you forget stuff down here," said the blonde girl. "She doesn't want to forget her name." Then she grinned. "Look at this," she said and waved her hand again. From the ceiling of the beauticians, a spider fell into one of the girls' hair. She screamed, dropping her nail polish to the floor with a shatter. "Bernice, fucking stop it," she yelled, shaking the spider from her hair and glaring over towards the blonde girl who laughed like a hyena. "Don't worry," Bernice said when she saw our disapproving looks. "That's my cousin Ricky. She's a bitch. At least I'm not a psycho like you," Ricky yelled back. Bernice rolled her eyes. "Totally get a potion from the lady," she said, turning to us. "It's wicked." She pointed at the sleeping girl in the chair. "That's my girlfriend Persephone," she said. "And like actual lesbian girlfriends, by the way. Not like how old ladies call their pals girlfriends. Persephone's got dream-weaving powers. Like a teenage Freddy Krueger. Can jump into your dreams and bring anything from a dream into the real world." I stared at the sleeping girl, the unease in my chest like a gnawing ant. Could she wake up? Was she permanently dead to the world? I looked back over at the Lady Kelpatra's store. She was sending me a look that made my skin crawl, hungry and sharp. I shifted uncomfortably. I don't know how the hell Bernice had magical powers. This was all insane. Maybe I would wake up back home any moment now. Felt too real to be a dream. But all this lady person wanted was a drop of blood for a real-life magic potion. I'd be stupid to turn her down. I started moving towards the stall again, and the Lady Kelpatra grinned from ear to ear. "Done," I heard a voice say and turned. Baba Lennox was hobbling towards us, gesturing at Lucy to come over. The sliver of unease tickled unpleasantly at the back of my neck. I'd forgotten about him completely. As we gathered around him, he opened his palm, showing us a shiny silver key. "What is that?" The Lady Kelpatra yelled suddenly, and Baba Lennox snapped his hand shut. "You think you're clever, Lennox, but you ain't slick," she said with a nasty grin. "I seen you racing after the dragon door. Now you got a key in your hand. You stole it, didn't you? You stole the key to the dragon door. What's even in the dragon door? I wonder what the bosses of this place would think of you, skulking around where you're not allowed. Baba Lennox gawped at her. I noticed the music had gone quiet and I looked up. On the giant screen, Regina had gone still, her face losing its constant smile and becoming blank and staring. Stole a key? She called out, voice booming around us and bouncing off the walls. Stole a key? Baba Lennox moved as fast as lightning. He grabbed our arms and started running with us towards the gold tracks again. Although there wasn't any cart to climb into, I was closest to him and he stuffed the key in my hand. Don't forget the dragon, he hissed as we reached the vinyl flaps. If they get me, you need to escape here on your own. Tell the authorities about this place. We do not tolerate thievery in our establishment, Regina called. My dear customers, please help us capture the troublemaker who has stolen our staff's property. You shall be rewarded. Lucy was looking around behind us. She let out a horrified wheeze. I turned. There was a horrible stench in the air that reminded me of rotten leaves and stagnant water. Her head, Lucy whimpered. Her head. In the tank, the mermaid was still swimming around, but her head had gone. Just a wriggling torso, arms and tail. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I saw that in the beauticians and the hair salon, the teenage girls had all run to hide. It came off, Lucy wailed. There was a deafening crash of water and glass, and the tank water poured out onto the floor in a flood. Emerging from the tank was the mermaid's head suspended in the air, her mouth hanging open, her eyes rolled back to show the whites. Her hair was starting to grow, tendrils whipping out longer and longer with a sound like a videotape being rewound. A reward, eh? The Lady Kelpisher said with a cackle. Don't mind if I do. Something was happening to the old lady's face. Her skin and dress was rippling, shivering. Then she burst into a cloud of moths, gray, white, and black. What the fuck is going on? Screeched Darius as Baba Lennox tried to clamber up the tracks, dragging us along. Then Baba Lennox screamed as the moths swarmed on him. They flapped around his face, attaching to his neck and face. Blood began to streak down his chin. Hide, he yelled at us. And I grabbed Lucy's and Darius's arms, pulling them across the tracks for the opposite set of vinyl flaps. There was a soggy slapping sound, and I turned to see the mermaid's head was levitating slowly through the air in our direction. Tons of soaking hair floating around her and dragging across the floor. Everything went dark as we managed to clamber inside the tunnel entrance, hiding in the shadows, huddled together. For a few long moments, we just sat there, holding our breath and shaking. Baba Lennox's cries were growing faint as though he was being dragged away. I wondered if the moths had carried him off or the mermaid's prehensile hair. No, I heard Regina's frustrated voice from outside on the screen. He's not the one with the key. Dear customers, the thieves are still loose. Please, we must work together to capture the criminals befouling our lovely establishment. Remember, you will be rewarded. I could feel the jagged edge of the key sticking into the flesh in my hand. I pulled my old toy crocodile out of my dressing gown pocket. Unscrewing the head, I put the key inside, nestled next to my switchblade. No one will see it in there, I whispered to the others. No one knows that we're the ones who have it. We just need to stay low and act normal, and search this place top to bottom for the dragon door without anyone noticing. Okay? I felt Darius and Lucy nod beside me, trembling with fear. There was a bump against us, and we muffled screams. It was only the cart that had completed its round and was trying to roll across the tracks again. With the cart behind us, hopefully we looked like fresh arrivals and not people hiding in the tunnel. We wandered out into the shopping center together. All three of us stood like stunned rabbits. A blonde teenager was spraying her hair in a salon. Another girl sleeping in a swivel chair. At a beautician's, a third teen was painting her nails while one wrote in lipstick on the mirror. I looked at Darius with confusion. How'd we get here again? I asked. My brain felt slow and muggy, not working properly. My twin just blinked at me. I don't know, said Darius slowly. Were we just with someone before? I can't remember. I replied and looked at the girl beside us. She had her name embroidered on her nightgown. Lucy. I probably got a limo here. I don't know about you lot. She said in an uppity fashion. I shook my head. What are we even here for? I said. I've got no idea, Darius replied. Our minds were completely blank. I couldn't even recall what happened 5 minutes ago. My short-term memory was a white, foggy haze. There was a tickling at the side of my neck and I brushed at it. A gray moth fell to the ground along with droplets of blood. It fluttered on the ground and then took flight again. The collar of my pajama shirt was dotted with red. I blinked lazily at the insect flapping away from us. I looked at my two companions with confusion. Was I supposed to buy something? Was someone's birthday coming up? I had no idea why I was at the shops for. I should have written a list. The triplets probably just dumped us here, said Darius, and I smiled bitterly. Lucy shot us a narrow look. My parents wouldn't have dumped me anywhere, she snapped. They'll be here to get me in any moment. Good for you, Darius replied in a testy voice. We were both getting thoroughly sick of her. I'm just gonna browse, I said to my twin. We might run into the triplets and then we can go home. Darius nodded, and we started heading down the corridor. All the other shoppers seemed to tower above us as we moved through the crowd and the three of us moved closer together. I felt my skin tingling with unease. My heart an uncomfortable lump in my throat. The giant screen hanging from the wall had something wrong with it. The dancing woman's eyes looked like silver coins as she twirled and kicked and swayed to the endless droning music. The floor was damp. Our bare feet growing slimy. In some of the water puddles, I could see tiny flowers beginning to bloom. I could smell food from somewhere. Meats and bread and sugar. My stomach growled and I followed the aroma towards a restaurant. Normally at any other shopping center, Darius and I were fine exploring on our own, but this time we stuck closely to each other's sides. Despite her rudeness, Lucy was sticking just as close to us. I didn't want to be left alone in this place. I was reminded of the first time the triplets had taken us to the cinema when we were young. How I'd felt small and scared in the cavernous rooms with huge screens. Everything too large and intimidating. The three of us nervously hovered around the entrance of the restaurant. It was a buffet, deep dishes full of steaming food with ladies to help ourselves. Booth seats lined the room and everyone was full of people enjoying their meals. I couldn't remember when I'd last eaten and my stomach growled louder. You can come in, you know, someone called from the buffet. It was a large beefy man with frizzy hair and a red face. He had a friendly smile, but we still approached him like he was a dog who might snap at our heads. Get yourself some grub. All free, you know, he said as he ladled some food on his plate. My name's Andy. We shyly introduced ourselves as we turned to get ourselves plates. As I reached for cutlery, my plush toy in my pocket jostled in my pocket. I pulled the crocodile out and stared at it. I noticed Darius and Lucy staring as well. That's important for some reason, said Darius and Lucy, and I nodded. We need to find something, murmured Lucy. I felt like my brain was drowning in fog. Why were we here? Weren't we just shopping and having a good time? We didn't need to do anything important, did we? It didn't matter. I was hungry and wanted food. Putting my toy away, I saw there was a tag over each tray of food saying what country it was from. I put a pretzel with mustard and currywurst from Germany on my plate, along with Rogan Josh from India. Filling up a glass of orange juice, I looked around to try to find somewhere to sit. A young woman with bushy hair put her hand up at her table. I went over as Lucy and Darius got their own food. Didn't want you eating on the floor, said the young woman, motioning around at the full booths. My name's Taz, and it looks like you've already met my hubby Andy. I introduced myself as Andy, Darius, and Lucy came over to sit with us. Good choice, Andy said to me, looking at the German food. His plate had a giant hunk of meats on it. When he saw my curious look, he said, "Oh, this is pork knuckle, German stuff. I used to have it at family reunions." I looked with interest at what everyone else was having. Lucy had a bowl of pho and a glass of some colorful-looking dessert drink. "What's that?" I asked, and she sneered at me. "Chai tai," she said, like I had asked what 1 + 1 equaled. I don't know why I bothered with her. Darius was eating sushi. Taz had a big plate of what looked like a flat, holy pancake with colorful stews on top. My stepmom runs an Ethiopian restaurant that serves all this food. It's my favorite, Taz told me. You use the injera bread to scoop up the curries and stew. The first time I had it, I was looking for the knives and forks, but my stepmom says you eat it with your hands. I nodded, fascinated. The conversation dulled as we hoed into our food. It was all delicious, rich, and flavorsome. When I sipped the orange juice, I felt an odd aching in my chest, feeling nostalgic for something I couldn't place. "What's Lola after?" said Andy to Taz. I saw her hairy head floating down the corridor. Scared the crap out of me. I faintly remembered a woman's decapitated head with the eyes rolled back, surrounded by tons of wet blonde hair. It must have been an old nightmare I'd had or a snippet of a horror film I'd caught Darius watching. Speaking of, I felt my twin perk up beside me. Lola's a really good song by this band you've probably not heard of called the Kinks. No one cares. Lucy snapped at him and Darius fell silent. I fought back the urge to kick her in the shin under the table, resorting to glaring daggers at her instead. I pulled off a piece of the salty pretzel, dunking it in my curry and taking a bite. "This stuff's not as good as the family reunions," said Andy in a wistful tone as he nibbled on the pork knuckle. Taz nodded as she wiped the last bit of sauce on her plate up with her bread. "Yeah, this just makes me want to go home," she said with a faraway look in her eye. Everyone was silent as we were hit by memories. The interior of our city apartment was a mishmash of tacky gold ornaments that the triplets bought and tasteful antiques that old mother preferred. Old mother who made us huge breakfasts on weekends. Jam toast, croissants, pancakes, hot chocolate, and fresh squeezed orange juice. I looked down at my glass, realizing that this is what I was feeling nostalgic for. We were stuck here. None of us could get home. Baba Lennox had told us that the dragon door was the way out. "Why are they keeping us here?" I said, looking around at the small group. Everyone's faces were clearer and sharper now, all of us breaking through the brain fog at once. "Yeah," said Taz with a frown. "And why do we forget everything?" Darius let out a distressed moan. "How are we supposed to remember next time the amnesia sets in?" he said. "Amnesia means forgetting things if you didn't know." Everyone shot him an annoyed look. "Maybe we're like in a human monogatari," Darius went on. "Monogatari is a fancy word for zoo." "We know what it means," Lucy snapped back. "We're all just little pets for their amusement," Darius said, undeterred by her rudeness. "Or we're in limbo, and Regina, Rawhead, and Bloody Bones are Grim Reapers or something." Taz frowned. "I found out about the plastic flower in a pamphlet in the mail," she said. "I rang the number, and a taxi picked us up the next night. How do you book a trip to limbo?" Darius was quiet. I remembered that Mom had said the same, finding out about this place in a mailed pamphlet. Maybe it was a trick, and if you ring the number, you agree on a mass suicide of you and whatever family you bring. Lucy immediately bristled like an angry cat. "My parents wouldn't kill me," she said. "Or they're harvesting us, fattening us up to eat," said Darius, On a roll now with ideas. Andy patted his big stomach. I'd last him a few weeks. He grinned. Whatever's happening here. I don't want to stick around and find out, said Taz. Does anyone remember how to get out of here? I looked down at my plush crocodile, unscrewing the head. I opened it up and showed the group what I had inside. My switchblade and the shiny silver key. Around the table, Taz's eyes widened. Andy's mouth fell open, and Darius and Lucy jerked in recognition. Someone screamed, the sound deafeningly loud. Bouncing down the hall, we whipped around and saw Regina's giant face on the hanging screen. Her coin eyes pointed straight at me. The thief! The thief! She yelled. She has the key. She has it. Everyone in the restaurant exchanged baffled looks. They'd obviously all been affected by the forgetfulness, too. What's she talking about? They murmured. What key? A stench of swamp water, seaweed, salt and rotting plants hit us all at once. There was a whirling sound like a tape being unwound. Down the other end of the hall were huge coiled trunks of sopping blonde hair slithering towards us. Yes, I heard the deafening shout of Regina from the screen. Capture the criminal and receive a reward. The key must be returned. Fuck off, Lola, Andy shouted. Leave them alone. Then he bent down and whispered to us. Don't worry, I'll keep her at bay. I've taken a potion from the Lady Calpatra. Taz immediately ducked behind the table at his words. Run, she hissed. Scrambling to our feet, we made a run out of the restaurant. The heavy food in my belly made me feel slow and sluggish. A tendril of hair as thick as a Burmese python whirled over our heads and we screamed, throwing ourselves to the floor. It punched a hole through the screen, ripping it apart with a cackle of electricity. Regina's face flapped grotesquely as the blonde tendrils swept the hall, smashing windows. All the patrons were running and screaming, trying to find shelter. We tried to get to our feet, but we heard a rumbling sound in the distance. Down the hall, covering the entire floor, was a wave of billowing hair, rising up like a tsunami about to crash down on us. Suddenly, Andy bounded in front of us on all fours. Something was happening to him. His clothes were dissolving away, being replaced by dark fur. His shoulders were bouncing up, and he was growing bigger, his hands changing into animal-like claws. He snarled and snapped as his mouth grew into a drooling maw full of black gums and sharp teeth, his nose stretching into a snout, his eyes rolling in his skull. The Andy Wolf launched through the air, scrambling through the undulating waves of blonde locks. At the end of the hall, hidden among the tendrils, I could see a woman's face with the eyes rolled back. The Andy Wolf was headed straight for it, vines of hair wrapped around the Andy Wolf, lifting him up to the ceiling. The corridor was chaos. The tendrils were thrashing madly, slamming against the walls and ceilings as the Andy Wolf snapped and tore at them. Regina's ripped face filled up the remains of the hanging screen as she shouted, "The key! Get the key!" Down the hall, I spotted an elevator. A way to escape. I motioned at Lucy and Darius, pointing at it, while the Andy Wolf kept Lola distracted. We could make a run for it. We all charged. Suddenly Lola threw the Andy Wolf at us like a bowling ball at pins. The huge weight of the animal smashed into me full force. My crocodile toy went flying, the key and knife clattering onto the floor of hair as the Andy Wolf knocked my head against the wall. The world went black around me. My head was throbbing in pain, like a knife being thrust into my forehead. I was surrounded by a void of nothing, just complete blackness wherever I looked. I moaned, holding on to my aching head. Through the darkness, I could see a faint, glowing pink shape. It was dancing and twirling through the void towards me. As it grew closer, I could see it was a teenage girl with dyed pink hair and space buns. "Oh, hi," she said in a monotone voice, her face expressionless. "Whose head have I ended up in?" I just blinked at her with confusion. "Not a lot of people are asleep right now," she said. "You alright?" I didn't know what to say. The girl took my hand. "Let's see how you're doing," she said, and the blackness faded away around us. We were in the shopping center, and I could see my unconscious body sprawled across the floor. Lucy and Darius were at my side, yelling my name frantically as the Andy Wolf pawed at my side like a distressed puppy. The floor of blonde hair was retreating with an unwinding sound, dragging my toy crocodile and the key with it. "Thank you so much," said Regina's strawberry ice cream voice. "You shall be promptly rewarded." I heard the pink-haired girl tut beside me. "Bunch of freaks, the people that run this place," she said, and the shopping center disappeared around us. We were back in the black void, the teenager glowing pink through the darkness. "Do you want a spot of help?" she said, her voice and face still devoid of emotion. "I can bring anything from your imagination into the real world. My girlfriend, Bernice, says I'm like a friendly Freddy Krueger. And by a girlfriend, I don't mean how middle-aged straight ladies say it. We're total lesbians." Bring something from my imagination into reality. The first thought I had was of a Japanese dragon dancing across the wall like a living painting. Then it morphed into a memory of watching the Chinese New Year's dragon dance from the apartment window. The huge, glittering swaths of fabric, glaring eyes and snarling mouth moving down the street. The puppeteers beneath, using poles to work its long, curling body. "Very creative," said the strange pink-haired girl, and I realized through the void the Chinese dragon from my memories was recreated, all in reds and oranges like a trail of fire. I saw a small smile beginning to grow across the pink-haired girl's face. "This is gonna be fun," she said. I awoke to the rhythmic sound of banging drums and clattering bells. Lucy and Darius sighed in relief when they saw I was all right. I stared behind them, mouth hanging open. "What is that?" I heard Regina's voice shout. "What is that?" Lola's disembodied head slowly turned around. The Andy Wolf's body and face was shrinking, teeth disappearing into his mouth. The rhythmic music was getting louder. A giant's growling face with fiery eyes, giant teeth, and a red spiky mane was dancing, rocking side to side down the corridor towards us. Its body was all rippling red and gold scales, and beneath it was billowing rainbow smoke. The creature filled up the entire corridor, from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. The crashing cymbals and thundering drums was so loud, I thought it would burst my ears. Feeling it bellow in every corner of my brain, Lola's head was floating backwards, trying to get away from it. No one said anything. Everyone just staring open-mouthed. It was nearly at us now. I saw Lucy turn. The blonde hair had stopped moving, limp and harmless on the floor, no longer dragging my toy and key away from us. Lucy bolted as the music thrummed, canceling out every other noise, making my teeth rattle and my eyes vibrate in my skull. Lucy was in the path of the giant creature, its leering mouth looming hungrily down at her. Scooping it all up, Lucy bounded back again. She pushed the key and toy into my hand, and I put the key inside the crocodile's head. The creature had reached us. It moved past, its body pushing us against the wall. Everything turned to rainbow haze as we were pressed against the wall, clutching at each other. The twin yellow beacons of its eyes glowed through the smoke ahead. My mind felt completely empty. No thoughts, just the crash of the music. I saw Darius raise his hand next to his mouth, flapping soundlessly, pointing down the corridor. If we moved across the hall, we'd reach the elevator in a few seconds. The glass door of the elevator grew closer as we moved through the technicolor smog. Slamming my hand against the button, the door slid open and we fell desperately inside. The door shut again, and after we pushed at the buttons, it moved down at a snail's pace, inch by inch. Through the glass door, we watched the continued chaos. Lola was hovering next to her smashed tank, where we'd first seen her. Her headless body suddenly sat up and threw its hands back, clapping them forward. All the spilled water across the shopping center floor lifted up and melded together until it created a massive snake-like shape. Lola's head floated to the front of it, And then there was a roaring, rushing sound as the water snake threw itself towards the Chinese dragon. As soon as the water hit it, the dragon collapsed into a pile of soggy fabric. The water snake collapsed into a downfall of foul-smelling swamp water as the blonde head flew down the corridor and around a corner in a flurry of blonde, twisting hair. The elevator rolled down into the darkness of the floor below. Through the clear elevator doors, we saw a circular room with a skylight where the sun shone in. There was a huge pile of something in the middle of the room, a figure moving inside it. "What is that?" Darius whispered, and the figure froze, turning around. We shrunk away. It was Rawhead, sitting in a bird's nest of twigs and wadded up slimy hair of all different colors. The lift kept moving downwards into the darkness, leaving the figure and his disgusting creation behind. For a few seconds there was nothing but black. My mind felt empty and I wondered if I was falling into the brain fog again, or was just in a state of shock. I gripped my toy crocodile under my chin, hands crushed into the comforting felt. I didn't want to put it in my pocket again. The feel and smell reminded me of home. The elevator doors opened. Nervously, we shuffled out. This floor was quieter, darker, as though abandoned. The neon lights were red, casting the place in a strange, ominous light. Everything was dead silent. I heard a rustling above me. We looked up. There was a flurry of moths fluttering around the ceiling. We watched as they flew down to the floor a few feet ahead, forming the shape of a person. It was a teenager with long dyed red hair, a black lacy dress, and red lipstick. She patted her plump stomach in a satisfied way. "Good feed," she said. Then she spotted us, staring, smiling. She nodded and waved at us. "Hello," she said. "Come over to the second floor sometime. I got a stall there that might interest you kids. Just ask for the Lady Calpatra." With that, she wandered off again down the hall and away into the darkness. My heart was thumping in my chest as we huddled together in the empty corridor. I felt like at any moment something would jump out at us. I could hear faint laughter. At the end of the corridor was an indoor gated playground, with a set of monkey bars, a sand pit, and a jungle gym with a slide. Swinging on the bars was a kid younger than us, with freckles, long black hair, and a beanie. When he spotted us, his laughter stopped, his smile freezing. He dropped from the bars and hurried sheepishly through the gate. "I wasn't playing on it," he said. "That's so babyish." "Yeah, right," Lucy replied. Flushing with embarrassment, he raced off with his head ducked down. My heart suddenly jumped into my chest with excitement. "Look," I said, pointing down the corridor. Moving across the floor was a painted Japanese dragon, swirling and dancing across the tiles. It was headed through the playground gates, swirling around in the sand pit. "You want to go on the playground?" Lucy said to me like I was brain dead. I wanted to smack her in the teeth. "The dragon tour's over there, you complete fucking..." I snarled back before Darius put a calming hand on my shoulder. "Come on," he said. "We'll be out of here in a second." The three of us headed across the floor towards the playground. Every store was shut and empty. The black shop windows like staring eyes. I kept looking over my shoulder. It was so easy for us to be chased down and cornered like scared mice in here. I couldn't see any other escape route but the elevator we'd come through and the dancing dragon head. It only took a few minutes to get to the playground, but it felt like a lifetime. Our footsteps the only sound in the silence. Darius reached the gate first, undoing the latch. The dragon quivered in the sand pit and shot away, up a rope ladder and into the jungle gym. Then the silence was broken all at once. All the lights turned on and an unwinding sound bounced off the walls. For a second, I thought of the horrible dismembered head with the eyes rolled back, poison fear shooting through my blood. But it wasn't Lola. A screen was rolling down from the ceiling. Regina's smiling face was revealed, fixed and frozen from the end of the corridor The elevator opened and hordes of excitedly chattering people moved out. Do you want an opportunity to dance on the big screen for every adoring patron at the Plastic Flower Resort? Cried Regina. That's right. We're having a May dance. The crowd cheered and clapped. Music started to blare through the hall. After the recent silence, it seemed extra loud, like an ice pick smashing into my ears. I'll be the judge and pick out the best of you, said Regina. 3 rounds of fun. Another cheer broke out, clapping and stamping of feet. Darius grabbed my arm. What is that? He said. The elevator was opening again. Waddling out was a swollen figure with shiny coin eyes and drool dripping down his chin. Rawhead, I hissed. He looked up, staring past the crowd and locking us in his silver gaze. Then all at once he bolted for us like a bullet from a gun. Lucy screamed and I felt my stomach turn to jelly. Jesus, screamed Darius as we made a run for it. We raced into the playground, across the sand pit and towards the rope ladder that would take us inside. We were plunged into a sea of bright, colorful plastic. I could see ahead, the end of the dragon's tail disappearing up a plastic tunnel. The slobbering sound was growing louder behind us. The pink plastic tunnel had foot and hand holes to climb. We raced for them and I felt something brush my foot. Turning around, I saw the white, drooling face peering up at us, mouth hanging open, saliva billowing down his front. Whimpering with terror, we clambered upwards. I couldn't fall. The handhold stretched out above our heads. I looked around again. Rawhead was struggling up the tunnel, swollen body dragging and sticking against the plastic. Finally, I could see the final step. We scrambled out of the tunnel, panting and heaving. We were in a little landing with a blue coil that led to a narrow hidden space behind the playground with a broken escalator leading upwards. There were numbered spinning blocks on poles, and through them we could see the whole floor. A dark blue slide led down to the ground again. The dragon was nowhere to be seen. Where is it? Darius hissed desperately. Where is it? It must have been too fast for us, I realized with growing dread. We'd missed it. For a second I was baffled at why Rawhead had run after us in the first place before realizing that, of course, Regina had set him loose like a rabid dog. After Andy had fought to protect us before, she wanted to use this May dance to distract people from trying to help us again. Bringing all these people down to an abandoned floor in the first place didn't seem very smart. It didn't matter, though. Whether Regina had made a smart decision or not, we needed to move. Let's get out of here, I said, moving towards the slide. Lucy grabbed my shoulder. Through the blocks, I could see someone emerging through the crowd and moving towards the playground. A tall, thin man with wild black hair, a top hat, and rumpled suit. Bloody Bones. Brother, Bloody Bones squawked as he jumped the fence. Where are they? Rawhead let out a gurgling moan from down in the tunnel. Bloody Bones screeched and we saw him clambering inside the bottom of the blue slide. The escalator. Get to the escalator, Darius wailed. A clammy hand wrapped around my ankle, jerking me back. I screamed, looking over to see Rawhead clambering up the last step, looking like a giant slug sweating and stuck in the tunnel, his hand on my foot. Darius grabbed my crocodile from my hand, unscrewed the head and grabbed the switchblade. He flung out with the knife, stabbing my attacker in the forehead. A thick, vicious liquid, like molasses, oozed down from his flabby face as he let out a groan, sliding down the plastic tunnel again. We heard him thump all the way down to the bottom. There was still scrambling from the slide. We had to move. Come on, I yelled at Lucy, who was still staring out over the floor. Her eyes were wide and teary, her mouth hanging open. I stopped to look at what was grabbing her attention. Her eyes were fixed on the dancing crowd. Lucy was looking at a man and a woman, laughing and dancing together, the man twirling the woman around. Mom, Dad, Lucy's son, tears billowing down her cheeks. Please. Down the dark indigo of the slide, I could see a talon-like hand reaching out for us. "Lucy, get out of the way!" I cried out, but it was too late. A pair of skinny arms shot out from the top of the slide and wrapped around Lucy's neck as Bloody Bones hauled them both backwards. They fell screaming down the playground slide together. Darius and I just clutched helplessly at each other. There was a high-pitched wail of despair. Peering through the rows of blocks, I could see down below, Bloody Bones, shaking Lucy upside down by the ankles. She was gripping her nightie so it wouldn't flip over her head and expose herself. Rawhead was standing beside them, the knife still buried to the hilt in between his eyes. He didn't seem to notice. I stared, heart thumping in my throat. Bloody Bones flipped Lucy right side up again. "What you do with the key?" he wailed. "You no have it? It not here?" Lucy stared desperately over at the dancing crowd. Her parents continued to completely ignore her. "Where are your friends? Where they be? Answer, answer. They have it. Horrible stealing thieves." Bloody Bones was screeching into her face as she cringed and shuddered. He shook her so hard her head rattled on her neck like a rag doll. "In the playground still?" he demanded, turning around, and I ducked down so he wouldn't see me. "No," said Lucy. "They got away. They're not there anymore. They ran into the May dance." Bloody Bones looked over at the crowd of dancing people who weren't taking any notice of the commotion. Then he passed Lucy off to his brother as casually as though he were handing him a grocery bag. She'd covered for us, lied in the face of a terrifying monster to protect us. She was our savior. "Come on," said Darius, and I turned to see he was already halfway down the coil. Watching the brothers walk off with Lucy tucked under their arm, I reluctantly followed him. We ran up the broken escalator, together. The escalator seemed endless, and my legs screamed at the strain of running up the steep incline for so long. Looking behind me, my stomach swooped, feeling a wave of vertigo. The bottom looked miles away. If I slipped, I'd break my neck. As we ran on, I slowly began to question why we were running in the first place. Was a shop going to close soon? Was there a sale on? Were we going to miss a bus? I could hear faint music in the patter of water. Finally, heaving for breath, we reached the top. We were in front of a large fountain and music was playing. Darius perked up at the sound of it. "That's a Jimi Hendrix song," he said. "The Wind Cries Mary." Someone was flying around the ceiling, diving through the spouting water. A small man with slicked black hair, wearing a loud gold suit, laughing as he flew around to the music. He seemed familiar. The neon lights made the water flash in different colors. He pushed his hand forward, manipulating the air to make the fountain pulse and warp in different, interesting shapes and motions. People were standing and sitting around the fountain, watching as they sipped from drinks and ate snacks. He flew and spun and danced in midair, making the water twirl with him with a flick of his hands. The song wasn't coming from the intercom. A man with spiky green hair was sitting in the doorway of a music store, with a record player attached to speakers, nodding and smiling along. "There was a girl with us before, wasn't there?" Darius asked. "Or maybe I'm thinking of something else." I shrugged. There was a stall down the corridor, in between the music shop and a video arcade. I approached it, seeing it was serving boba tea. I looked at the fridges full of drinks and opened up one of the doors, picking the cookies and cream flavor. I got a straw from the counter and stuck it through the plastic top. Darius had taken a seat at a bench, watching the flying fountain man. I joined him, taking a sip. In the back of my mind, I felt an uncomfortable itch, as though I were forgetting something. I was probably supposed to buy something at the shops and couldn't remember what. Didn't matter. I'd remember it later. The drink was delicious, and I passed it to Darius to try. He took a sip and his eyes widened, making an appreciative sound. We shared the drink between us. passing it back and forth as we watched the people run around and play in the arcade. We'd never much been into video games ourselves. The flying fountain man suddenly screamed and flew off over our heads and down the corridor. We looked up, seeing everyone scatter in different directions, running for safety. Through the fountain, a head was emerging, eyes rolled back, surrounded by tons of wet blonde hair. It was floating straight for us. We were frozen in place as the disembodied head grew closer, the soggy slop of its hair dragging against the floor. It stopped in front of us, the stench of seaweed and foul water so strong I thought I'd choke on it. "I'm sorry," she said in a high, girlish voice. "I didn't mean to scare you. My name's Lola." I blinked. "What?" said Darius, completely flabbergasted. "Sorry it looked like I was attacking you. I just wanted to take the key from you before Regina swooped," she explained. "I thought you just found the key and picked it up out of curiosity and didn't know how dangerous it was. Carrying that key puts a target on your head, and I wanted to protect you. Throwing the dog was a mistake." Darius and I exchanged confused looks. Then the memory came back to me. "Baba Lennox told us that the key unlocks the dragon door, which will get us out," I said. And Lola smiled, her head nodding up and down. "I can help if you ever run into the brothers and Regina again," she said. "Do you have any kind of container?" We felt around and Darius got his Russian nesting doll from his pocket, opening it up and pulling the smaller ones out. "Perfect," said Lola. Suddenly her hair started making that uncanny swirling sound like a tape being rewound. The tendrils of hair started to wrap around her hanging head, faster and faster until her face was covered. The wrapped head began rocking rapidly from side to side as the hair started squeezing and compressing her skull, making it smaller and smaller. Then when she had compacted herself to around the size of an apricot, she whizzed into the open Russian doll. Darius closed the top and then shook his head, looking dazed. I felt the same. Everything in the plastic flower was just utterly mad. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but it still made my head hurt trying to keep up with it all. "So she was alright all along," Darius said to me. "Maybe the other scary freaks around here are alright too." "Yeah, I bet the hair-munching, period-drinking brothers are actually a lovely pair," I replied. We stood up. "I keep forgetting," I muttered. "Find the dragon door. There's got to be a way to not get sucked into the brain fog." Darius threw up his hands. "I don't know," he said. "This is all just too goddamn crazy. I can't think straight." He looked at the Russian nesting doll and shuddered, throwing it into my hands. "I don't care if she's nice," he said. "Lola's creepy." So much for the horror film fan. Nonetheless, I tucked the Russian doll full of hair into my dressing gown pocket along with my toy crocodile. In the distance, we could hear a whispering sound. 2 pairs of silver eyes flashed ahead. We ducked under the counter of the boba cup store to hide. Stupid assholes. Stupid assholes. Bloody Bones was murmuring under his breath as he slunk down across the floor, Rawhead waddling next to him. Bloody Bones paused and stared into the arcade, which had gone dead quiet. Stupid assholes, he said again before continuing walking. Bloody Bones was strangely funny, always so outraged at everything in a ridiculously over-the-top way that was terrifying, yet amusing. I felt like crying and laughing at the same time, not like his brother Rawhead, who was just a grotesque nightmare. Sick of this. Sick of it. Bloody Bones was hissing to his brother. "Why can't we just do it the old way? It better. It better. No, we have to do it her way. Her dumb, stupid way that is stupid." Rawhead just made a gargling sound. He started hacking and heaving as Bloody Bones ignored him, still grumbling to himself. The short, fat man spat up a wad of tangled hair, stuck together with gooey phlegm. Leaning down, he picked it up off the floor and popped it back in his mouth again, starting to chew wetly. When their footsteps seemed faint, We peered over the countertop. The brothers were gone. The sounds of the arcade started up again. They were all laughing and chattering, acting as though nothing had happened. I looked over at the music store. The green-haired man was standing in the doorway with a frown on his face. When he spotted us, he smiled. "Yo," he said, waving at us. "You're new." We moved closer. "My name's Milo," he said, giving us a hand to shake. "My kid's running around here somewhere. We call him Cherry because he drinks cherry coke by the gallon. He's got it in his veins instead of blood." He said it in a jokingly way, but the plastic flower was so strange. Could have been true for all I know. "So you must have a glass of Milo then," I said, and the man grinned. "Sure do, sister," he said. "Come in and have a look around. It's grouse in here." Inside the shop were rows upon rows of CDs, cassette tapes, and records with guitars and keyboards against the wall. Cherry stuck his head up from under the counter. He was younger than us, about 10 and freckled, with a beanie over his long hair. He waved, sipping from a can of cherry coke. Darius immediately bolted around the place, picking things up and making excited sounds. It was his idea of heaven. Milo ran a finger through the tops of the records. "Want to listen to anything?" he asked me. I shrugged. "My brother's more into music than me," I said. I was reminded again of how fascinating everyone I met in this place was compared to myself. There wasn't really any story here that had grabbed my interest because I just wasn't an interesting person. The only thing that had grabbed my attention was the Lady Kelpetra's potions. That was only because it could change me from a dull blank space to someone worth paying attention to. "What's your favorite?" I asked Milo. "Play that." The man grinned. "Oh, there's too many. That's like choosing your favorite child," he said. "I'm your only child," Cherry said from the counter, and Milo laughed. "True that," he replied. "I'm a DJ. I've been collecting all this stuff for years. I'm trying to find something I haven't listened to." Darius paused in his happy exploring. He looked around at the store, bursting to the seams with CDs, cassettes, and vinyls. You'd think he'd be delighted to find another person with the same interests as him, but instead, a sullen expression was growing across his face. Milo clearly knew more about music than Darius, and that was a terrible thing. He had to be the expert in the room, and now he wasn't anymore. There was a muttering sound and footsteps in the corridor. My stomach did an unpleasant jump. Bloody Bones was lurching down the floor again, without his brother. Alone now. Was he going to be patrolling the corridor all day like a hungry watchdog? All day? What day is it? Is it night? How long had we been here for? "Oi, you!" Milo shouted, and Bloody Bones whipped around, face twisted up in a feral snarl. I shrunk back with fear. What the hell was he doing trying to actually talk to him? What? He screeched back. "Why the period blood, dude?" Milo said. "Fucking weird. What's wrong with regular blood?" Suddenly Bloody Bones was lunging towards us as Milo laughed and pressed a button on the wall. A plastic screen began to roll down over the entrance. Bloody Bones crashed against the barrier just as it closed shut, his breath leaving behind a fog of brownish residue. "It tastes better," he screamed. "You mock me? You dare? Nasty little thing? Make me sick." Darius and I backed away, clutching at each other. "Great job, Dad," snapped Cherry. "He's gonna be yelling at us all day now." Milo laughed even harder. "I know. It's hilarious," he said. "Look at that little freak go." Bloody Bones started jabbing his finger at us and screaming, spraying the plastic with spit. "I don't like you. I don't like any of you. Fuck all of you." "Oh, what language?" Milo replied in a fake posh voice like he was a horrified old lady. Bloody Bones let out a scream so high-pitched, I thought my eardrums would burst. Darius and I covered our ears cringing. "You are shifty little vermins. Vile vermins. Make me vomit," he squawked. "We give you everything and you steal. You steal. You steal, you stealers, you. You steal fizzy lifting drinks, said Milo, and Cherry burst out into laughter despite himself. The man just stared contemptuously at the spitting, hissing creature like it was a child throwing a temper tantrum. I'm sick of this fool, Milo said and flexed his palms. Outside the door, there was a whirling sound like a firework being unleashed. Cherry put his hands over his ears. A ball of fire exploded down the hall and we threw ourselves out onto the floor in terror. Bloody Bones screeched one last time and bolted with his arms over his head, whistling to himself. Milo went over and pressed the button to make the screen roll up again. The two of us just lay on the floor together. I started to think that maybe this was how the brain fog worked. We were being constantly bombarded with such bizarre events, combined with a sensory overload of sounds, sights, and smells that our mind just went blank, unable to process it all. Darius grabbed my arm. Look, he said in a hoarse voice. I turned to where he was staring. Dancing over the ceiling was the familiar painting of the Japanese dragon. Maybe before I would have felt a burst of excitement at the sight of it. Now I just felt numb. We got to our feet together and started walking for the door. Chase that dragon, little dudes, said Milo with a grin as Cherry waved. We just looked at them blankly as we staggered off. The sounds of the arcade, whirling, buzzing, ringing, and the manic laughter of the people inside rang in our ears. In front of us was a large screen hanging from the ceiling, and a slightly familiar petite woman with dark hair and doe eyes was dancing across it. Figure blown up so she towered above us. Dance, dance, go on and get it, and move it and groove it, and lose your minds. She was singing as she kicked her legs in the air, screen going through every cheesy effect in the book, from a mirrored image, to multiple dancing copies, to a star wipe, and a love heart transition. Beyond the screen the hall split, one side disappearing into darkness, the other opening up into an entrance to a cinema complex with a lolly bar and popcorn machine inside. My twin lifted up his arm, pointing wordlessly. Down the cinema corridor was a dancing red dragon, leaping and twisting down the walls. We went after it in silence. The corridor was wide with sticky carpet, the lit-up numbers of each cinema glaring out at us. The dragon slithered through one at the very end of the hall. As we entered the cinema, a man in the middle row looked around at us. I felt a strange stirring in my chest. He was wrinkled and frail-looking with wild gray hair and round glasses. His shirt was dotted with red stains, and he had what looked like insect bites all over his cheeks, chin, and neck. He smiled and beckoned us over. We took seats on either side of him. "Good day," he said, offering us a big carton full of popcorn. "My name's Lennox, but you can call me Baba." On the cinema screen was a vast, rugged plain of grass, white rock, and sand. The sound of heavy breathing mixed up with walking feet crunching against the ground. In the distance was a house, small and wooden. The door opened and a tiny shape started jumping up and down and waving, calling out something I couldn't hear. "I love this film," said Darius, grabbing a handful of popcorn. "Very underrated. Not many people have heard of it, but it's really good." The man snorted with laughter, shaking his head. "You haven't seen this," he said. Darius looked at him, affronted. "I have," he protested. "I'm a huge film buff. I've seen way more films than anyone my age." "You haven't seen this because it isn't a film," Baba Lennox said. "It's one of my memories." That struck Darius silent. I saw a flush rising on his cheeks, a mortified expression growing on his face. I turned back to the screen. The house was closer now, and I could see the tiny figure was an excited toddler, babbling in a language I couldn't understand. I caught a few words. "Baba, Baba." The film went black. Then it faded back in again, over a stovetop with a sizzling pan full of blueberry pancakes. A woman's voice was singing quietly in the background as the pan was jostled, flipping the pancakes around in the bubbling water. Then the scene abruptly changed to a young woman in a colorful dress and headscarf, Who was helping the toddler eat their plates of cut-up pancakes doused in syrup? How do you choose a movie to watch? Asked Darius. At his words, a textbook popped up on the screen, as though it was listening to us. Would you like to rewatch the last film you viewed? The letters proclaimed. A movie poster of Pete's Dragon showed beneath the text. Baba Lennox let out another bark of laughter. Darius sunk into the seat. I wasn't watching that. It must have made a mistake. That's so babyish. I was like getting really into unknown underground stuff. Baba Lennox flapped a hand at him. You want to watch it? He said. Darius just murmured under his breath. Speak up, son, the man said. After a brief silence, Darius muttered out, Yeah. Let's watch Pete's Dragon then, said Baba Lennox, clapping his hands together at the screen. As the film began, I noticed something by the glowing green neon of the exit sign. A Japanese dragon was swirling up and down the wall and then over the door. It was like a painting had been enchanted and brought to life. It stirred something in my chest. I looked down at the toy crocodile squashed into my dressing gown pocket. Getting to my feet, I followed the dancing creature out of the emergency exit. Baba Lennox and Darius didn't even notice. Too enwrapped in the film. I left them both behind. Outside the door, I saw I was at the end of the split corridor. The door shut behind me, looking like it was part of the wall. Ahead was a blinking sign of a champagne glass with a cherry in it, over an entrance with red velvet curtains. On either side, sprawled across the ground were two teenagers. We had too much Riki, one of them said, and they both burst into giggles. Never drink and smoke. Fuck off, Nalani Nakamura, Riki replied with a dopey grin on her face. I saw the end of a red-scaled tail flicking inside the curtained entrance. I walked over. I felt slow and faintly ill like I was walking through syrup. I found myself in a small foyer with a ticket booth and a small queue of people waiting to get into the venue. Payment, someone squawked from the ticket booth. Payment, payment. It was Bloody Bones, sticking his hand through the ticket booth slot, wiggling his fingers. The first person in line reached into their bag and plopped something into his outstretched palm. I realized it was an overflowing menstrual cup and I turned away, dry retching. A slurping sound filled my ears. When I turned back again, the tall, thin man was wiping his mouth, blood smeared down his chin. Next in line, he called. I felt a sliver of panic in my chest. I couldn't get in. I had nothing to pay with. You, said Bloody Bones. You. I know you. You scoundrel. You shit. You. The ticket booth door opened. Standing before me was Rawhead with his drooling mouth hanging open and a sticky brown wound between his eyes. I can help. The memory of a voice whispered in my head. If you ever run into the brothers and Regina again. I took out the Russian nesting doll from my dressing gown pocket and unscrewed the top. It happened all at once. A horrible stench of seaweed, and then soggy blonde hair exploded in every direction. I was knocked against the wall with the force of it, as an unwinding sound roared through the room. I saw Bloody Bones' screaming face as he was engulfed in it, choking and thrashing. I couldn't breathe. The wet hair was in my eyes, in my mouth, in my nose. Gagging, I felt myself sink into the floor, pressed down by the damp weight. The tendrils curled around me. I was lifted up and placed gently in front of the door that led to the club. I could see two arms and legs flailing madly in the ticket booth, letting out high-pitched wails that were muffled by the tons of hair. Among the pile of tangled clumps, I could see two eyes, rolled up so the whites showed. Rawhead was making trilling sounds of bliss, a huge delighted smile on his face as he threw himself into the sea of blonde hair. He rolled around in it, kicking his fat legs like he was swimming in the ocean. He shoved a big handful of the yellow locks into his mouth, chomping down. I slipped into the club silently, leaving him to it. I found myself in a dark room full of small circular tables with a bar on the right side. A stage on the far side where someone was performing, and a huge wall of red curtain on the left with cushy sofas against them. The light shades had red scaled patterns, casting the area in deep maroon. People were helping themselves to drinks behind the bar, or sitting on the couches giggling and passing glass bongs and cigarettes to and fro. The whole place was hazy with smoke and was stiflingly warm. I blinked around, blearingly. The music was more bearable here compared to the rest of the plastic flower. Just a gentle thrum in the background. There was a smatter of applause, and the person on stage curtsied. Their muscular build was straining the glittery, sequined dress they wore, the lights shining down on their heavily made-up face, brushing a lock of hair from their towering black beehive out of their eyes. "I'll be back in a sec, loves," they said in a deep masculine voice. They walked off the stage in their towering high heels and then stopped in front of me. They seemed familiar somehow. "Hello," said the drag queen. "How did you sneak in here?" I just blinked up at her. "My name's Cassandra," she said. She offered me a hand glittering with jewels. I shook it. My body felt heavy, my mind dull and tired. A petite woman with dark hair trotted over towards us. We peered at each other for a long, confused moment, like the drag queen who I'd already forgotten the name of. She was very familiar. "I feel like I've seen you around, my dear," she said, and then smiled, shaking her head. She handed the drag queen a cocktail, and they clinked their glasses in a cheers. "You should try the May dance, Cass. It was super fun dancing on the big screen," she said, and the drag queen nodded. Something moved in the corner of my eye. A painting of a red Japanese dragon was swirling over the floor, rising up the curtains and across the wall, before disappearing out of sight. Dragons were important somehow. I couldn't remember why. It was interesting to see it move like that, as though it wasn't just a painting but a live creature. I wondered if it was some trick with a projector and lights. A woman and a drag queen were talking to each other in front of me, sipping cocktails. I tried to think if I'd been in their conversations or not. I don't think so. Leaving them behind, I walked over towards the corner of the room where the curtains met the walls. There was the first step of a curving black metal staircase. I walked up them, the handrail warm under my palm. It was on a metal walkway so close to the ceiling if I was an adult I'd have to crawl. At the end, the dragon was dancing on the spot. I knew somehow the dancing dragon was important. I took my toy crocodile out of my pocket, staring at it. Were they connected somehow? I smelt the old felt, remembered old mother giving the toy to me on my 4th birthday. The triplets looking unimpressed at how dollar store it looked. But it had become my firm favorite, lugging it around with me everywhere. When I'd gotten the switchblade, I'd cut off the head and hid the weapon inside. I opened up the head. My switchblade was gone, stuck in Rawhead's forehead. I smiled at the morbid rhyme I'd made. There was also a silver key. Baba Lennox had made this key. He'd made it for the dragon door. Made it to escape from here. The brain fog lifted all at once. The dragon could dance away at any moment. Heart pounding in my chest, I grabbed the key, ran down the hallway, pushing my fist through the dragon's snarling jaws. The painting froze as I heard a click. I turned the key. A black circle was growing in the dragon's mouth like it was opening wide to take a bite out of me. Inside the entrance was a narrow corridor, all in dark red velvet. I crawled inside, the red velvet surrounding me on all sides. At the end of the half, I could see a set of stairs leading up. I held my breath as I got to my feet, my head brushing the wall, walking forward. The whole place reeked of blood and saliva. I felt like I was walking into the dragon's stomach. To the side, I saw the velvet wall had become a curtain with light behind it. I looked through the crack. It was a circular room with a sunroof, letting in light. Up against the wall was a pile of dirty sanitary products. Chewed up tampons, soggy pads, and menstrual cups with tooth marks in the plastic. There was a pile of goopy hair and twigs all arranged in a nest on the floor. In the middle of the disgusting creation was something shiny and sharp. My switchblade. Someone was dancing around in front of a tall mirror, their strawberry blonde hair and dark pink dress swirling around them. The mirror didn't show their reflection. It showed all 3 floors on the shopping center. People milling about, chattering, and shopping. I moved as slowly and quietly as I could towards the nest. A part of me was screaming to just run, leave the damn knife behind. But a old mother had given it to me. I couldn't leave it there. I picked it up with a wet, gluggy sound. The woman paused and then turned. "I've got a live audience," she said. She stared at me with her fixed smile and silver coin eyes. "Naughty, naughty," she said. "You've snuck in here, haven't you?" I backed away, clambering for the curtain. "You're the cheeky thief who took the key, aren't you?" she said and began to move. Her dress was so long I couldn't see her feet, and it made her look like a ghost gliding for me. I burst into the shadowy corridor again, my breath caught in my throat. What way had I come, and what way was I going? I couldn't see anything in the dark red shadows. I blindly shot to the right. There was a scrambling sound as the curtain ripped open behind me. I turned. Her face seemed giant, her smiling mouth wide and outstretched, filling up the small, narrow hall. The stench of blood and spit was so strong, I thought I would suffocate on it. I could see light ahead of me and I ran desperately for it. I tumbled out of a circular hole onto the ground. I looked up and moaned. I was back where I'd started, on the walkway over the club. A white hand shot out of the dragon's mouth, taking the key out of the lock and tugging it free. The mouth was shrinking. I jammed my knife through the snarled mouth, twisting it. The blade snapped off, leaving the handle in my grip. The dragon froze in place, mouth half opened. Inside its maw, I could see silver eyes peering out of a paper white face. "Take care of her for me," she said, her smile unchanging. Of course. I heard a familiar squeak behind me. Looking up, I saw the white face and red downturned mouth of Bloody Bones. I felt an arm around my neck. I was picked up and dragged over the railing towards the club floor below. Regina's face inside the dragon's maw suddenly changed. Her smile disappeared, expression coiling up with what looked like fear. "Don't hurt it," she cried. "Bye-bye," said Bloody Bones, dropping me. I felt my stomach had disappeared as the walkway got smaller above me. Falling for the floor, I was thrown into darkness. Everything hurt, and I moaned with pain. I was in a familiar void. I wished I could stay there, floating in the darkness. A pink shape was glowing beside me, and I curled up towards the light. There was a hand gently stroking my head. "Hello again," said the pink figure. "I've been watching you since the Chinese dragon dance. Damn, you were nearly there. So close, yet so far." I felt tears of frustration burn down my cheeks. I tried to hold back the sobs, but they were bursting out of me. "It's okay," she said. "You just went in there without a plan is all. Rookie mistake. We've all done it. You know when you first play a video game and just blunder into the boss battle completely unprepared and get your arse handed to you? That's what you done." I couldn't reply, just crying like a baby. The hand stroking my hair reminded me of old mother comforting me after a nightmare. I wish this was all just a nightmare I could wake up from. "Now you just need to play to your strengths and to their weaknesses next time," she said. "I don't have any strengths," I whimpered back. "I'm useless." "Come on now," she said. "Beating yourself up ain't gonna get you anywhere. Just think, what are you good at? It can help you get out of here." "I'm good at nothing," I replied, sniveling. Maybe I should just down every one of the Lady Calpatre's potions to fight them. The dream girl shook her head. No, she said. What happened whenever they got attacked? The hair tearing, Regina scream, Rawhead getting stabbed, Milo shooting fireballs after Bloody Bones, the brothers drowning in hair? What happened to them afterwards? I sighed in defeat. They bounced back, I said. It was just a minor distraction before they came back again, completely fine. The dream girl nodded. They are physically tough as shit, and we are physically weak as hell, she said. But what about their weaknesses? The darkness was fading around us, as I slowly became conscious again. Haven't you noticed? The glowing pink figure said that the three of them are all fucking stupid. I was being dragged by my ankles across a tile floor. I groaned, my head and back pounding with pain. I was somewhere glowing red, a tall, thin man pulling me over the floor as if I were a sack of potatoes. Then he dumped me next to a stall all at once. I realized I was where the maid dance had happened, where the brothers had chased me through the playground. Do you know anyone who bleeds? He said to me. You don't smell like the special blood. I can't find any special blood nowhere. I'm hungry. I just groaned again. He exhaled harshly, throwing his hands up. Useless, he muttered before storming off again. I slowly sat up, body screaming in agony. I felt like I'd broken something, my wrist pulsing with white-hot pain. There was something dripping from my nose, and I lifted my uninjured hand, my skin soaking through with red. Something moved out of the corner of my eye, and I looked up. The ceiling was covered with fluttering moths. They all began to float down in front of me, forming the shape of a person. A middle-aged woman with dyed red hair, a bit plump around the middle but with scrawny limbs, crow's feet around her eyes, and the skin of her face beginning to sag. Oh, poor thing, she rasped. You need a healing potion for that there wrist. She leaned in close and took my chin in her long-nailed hand. I could feel her cold breath on my face, saw her eyes staring hungrily at the blood leaking from my nose. Just a drop is all I need for payment, she said. Just one little drop. Maybe before I would have been scared, but now I was just too exhausted and defeated to feel anything. You'd take a drop and then just leave me here? I said. Her face curled into a vicious glare, eyes flashing. I ain't no squanderer. How dare you accuse me of such? Then she dumped me back to the floor. She made a move to storm off, but hesitated, staring at the blood on my face. Please, she said, her raspy voice twisting into a horrible, grating whine. Please just give me some. I sighed. Go ahead. I said, and her face split into a huge, toothy grin. She yanked me up by the collar, and I hissed, feeling my broken wrist flare at the sudden movement. She rubbed her hand over my face until it was slick with my blood. Then she let me fall to the floor as she licked and slurped at her palm. A lot more than just a drop. I'll get you that healing potion, she said as she staggered off down the corridor, leaving me behind. Promise. I looked around at where I was. The stall Bloody Bones had dumped me in front of was a tea shop. Getting up on shaky feet, I wandered in, nursing my broken wrist. The walls were painted with Moroccan patterns. Little circular tables scattered around with dollies on the tabletops and comfortable cushions on the seats. Against the wall was a tea cart, and I walked over even though I knew it wouldn't be as good as old mother's. The 4 levels of the cart were laden with cups of tea, all steaming hot. There was a jug of milk and a sugar bowl on the top shelf. I picked up a sugar cube and dumped it into a cup. I didn't trust myself to pick up the heavy milk jug with my non-dominant hand, so just opted for black tea. Over at the playground, I saw a kid about my age with a black bobbed haircut and a nightie playing in the sand pit. She was building an elaborate sand sculpture of what looked like a mermaid. She was pretty decent at it. I noticed that her hair looked ragged, with chunks pulled out of it, and bald patches as though someone had taken huge bites out of her hair. I pushed the tea cart over to her. Hi, I said, and she turned to me with a narrow frown. Would you like a cup of tea? Can't you see I'm busy? She snapped back. With the side of her shovel, she started carving out the shapes of scales on the mermaid's sandy tail. I turned to leave her to it. I mean, she said in a flippant voice that hid a note of hopefulness. You can stay if you want. Oh no, I said, motioning at my tea cart. I've got deliveries. I saw disappointment in her eyes, her mouth turning downwards. Whatever, she replied, going back to her sand sculpture. Shrugging, I turned to roll my tea cart down the hall towards the elevator. The only button was up, so I pressed it. The clear glass doors rolled open, and I went inside. I rose up into the ceiling, and for a second there was darkness. Then I saw something in front of me, a glaring red dragon face with a half-opened mouth. It was moving through the darkness in a jerking, clunky manner like a broken video. The elevator kept rising up and the creature disappeared beneath me. The upper floor appeared into my view, and with a ping the doors rolled open. I peered out and cautiously pushed my tea cart forward. I was in a hallway full of lush green moss and wildflowers growing across the floor. White dandelion fluff was gently falling from the ceiling like rain. "Little love, little love," a harsh voice called. There was a stall in the middle of the hall and a young woman with dyed red hair was waving me over. Pushing the tea cart, I went over to her. "For your wrist, little love," she said, passing me a small bottle fizzing with dark liquid dotted with glitter flecks. "See, the Lady Kelpatra ain't no scammer." I stared at it suspiciously. Then I picked up one of the cups of tea and put it on the counter in front of her. "Thanks," I said, taking a swig. It tasted like mint chocolate mixed with something herby and medicinal. I blinked. The blaring hotness in my wrist was just a dull ache now. I flexed my fingers, feeling a slight ping of pain. The skin only looked slightly swollen, not like I was wearing a puffed-up glove like before. "All of it," cried the Lady Kelpatra, and I obeyed, swigging it all down. In a blink of an eye, my wrist felt completely fine. "You believe in 'em now, don't ya?" she said with a smirk. I nodded, a little uneasily. "Thanks again," I said, rolling the tea cart away. "Any time." The Lady Kelpatra called back to me as she looked suspiciously at the teacup, and then threw it, unceremoniously, over her shoulder. Built into the wall was a big tank full of water, and at the bottom was a headless mermaid body and tall, just wiggling and thrashing about like it was having a fit. A pretty nightmarish display that would probably traumatize little children for life. I went into the hair salon. A blonde teenager lying on the floor next to a swivel chair where a pink-haired girl was sleeping in. Looking at her hair dye was a man with a spiky green hairdo. Looking at the girl in the spinning chair, a memory of a dream came to me, of a black void with a glowing pink light. "You've been a great help," I told the dream girl, hoping somehow she could understand. The blonde teen looked up at me. "I wish she'd wake up," she said. "I miss her." I felt awkward, not knowing what to say. "Would you like a cup of tea?" I said, and the blonde teenager shrugged. "Thanks," she said, getting up to take a cup. "My name's Bernice. We've probably met before and we forgot each other. That's how this place works." I nodded as she poured a bit of milk into her tea. "That's why I don't really want to leave Persephone here," she said. "What if I forget her?" I was about to speak when the green-haired man sauntered over to us. "Get Milo there by any chance?" he said, and I looked at my tea cart. Of course, there hadn't been a cup of Milo before, but as soon as he'd asked, one had appeared. I handed it to him. He clicked his fingers, and a spark of fire hovered at his palm. Putting it underneath the cup, he heated up his drink. "I like it scalding. Burn your lips off," he said, taking a sip. "Now I gotta go find my little rugrat. Always running off on me. Sugar high. I feed him too much Coke. That's the soft drink, mind you, not the other kind. Don't call the cops on me now." With that, he strolled off to the stall. As he passed the Lady Kelpatra's store, he purposely knocked over one of the vials, smashing it to the floor. She cursed after him and he laughed, walking off. "Will Persephone wakes up, give her a cup of tea from me," I told Bernice. She nodded and I began rolling my tea cart down the corridor. I paused at the buffet restaurant. "Anyone want tea?" I called in. A few people looked up with interest and ambled over. "You look familiar," said a large, red-faced man. A bushy-haired woman beside him laughed and patted him on the arm. You got a good memory for an old codger, she said as the man dumped sugar and milk into his tea. You know how to make a man feel loved, he replied before turning to me. Come in and have some grub. I shook my head. No thanks, I said, and the man shrugged, turning around. Riki, Nalani Nakamura, get some tea in ya. It'll help with them hangovers. At one of the booth tables, two teenage girls, staring bleary-eyed into foil wrappers of greasy chips, just glared back at him. The man and woman picked up extra cups to bring over. After they'd left, I rolled my tea cart over towards the elevator at the end of the hall. Inside were three people. One a petite, dark-haired woman, the other a large, muscular man, and the third, a man in a gold suit. Oh, tea, said the woman, immediately reaching over to take a cup. Thank you, thank you. Casper, Abe, look. A little tea girl. This place has everything. Do you have food too? We haven't eaten in forever and we're simply starving. I shook my head and pointed down the corridor where the buffet was. Oh, thank you, said the gold-suited man before turning to the other two. Isn't she just the cutest? Adorable, the muscular man replied as the three walked out into the hall. I pressed the up button on the elevator. After a few moments, there was a ding and the doors rolled open. Down the end of the hall, I could see the faint shape of a fountain and heard the sounds of an arcade somewhere in the distance. To my right was a cinema complex. I rolled my tea cart out of the elevator and across the floor. In the cinema foyer, I could see the back of a fire engine redhead at the popcorn machine, filling a box full. Darius? I called uncertainly. My twin turned around. Sally, he said, cradling his popcorn box under his chin. We walked over to each other. Darius looked shell-shocked, and I felt just as shaken. I hadn't thought of him at all. He'd completely disappeared from my mind as soon as I'd left him in the cinema. This place is fucked, he said in a trembling voice. I forgot my own sister. I forgot you too, I murmured back. I went through everything that had happened since I'd left him, about what had happened in the room inside the dragon's mouth. I don't know how we're supposed to get out of here, I said. I'm completely useless. Darius shot me a confused look. What? He said. What the hell are you talking about? I can't do anything, I replied. I'm just wandering around this place like a headless chicken hoping I can fumble my way out. I'm not smart enough to figure out a way to save us all. I'm not tough enough to face Regina and the brothers without pissing my pants like a wimp. Persephone? Said to use my skills, but what skills do I have? Darius just stared at me, more bemused than ever. Where's this no confidence shit coming from? He said. You're a good person. Better than me. Look, you're rolling a tea cart around giving out cups, and you kept trying to talk to Lucy even though she was a pain in the ass. I didn't try talking to her. All this time we've been here, you're the one saying hi to people, being nice. Being a good person isn't helpful, though, I said with exasperation. What, do I just nicely ask Regina to let us out, please? Darius sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I don't know, he said. Maybe we could just stay here until the authorities track us down. You know old mother would hire the best detectives to find us. I stared down at the tea cart. Unless the brain fog makes everyone in the real world forget about us all too, I said. Darius shivered. Don't say that, he said. Old mother wouldn't forget about us. I was reminded of Lucy, staunchly insisting her parents would come and save her. I remembered her scream as she fell down the slide in Bloody Bones' arms. Had I seen her again since then? I couldn't recall. I think we're up shit creek, Sally, said Darius. The whole plan was to find the dragon door and walk out of here. You did that, and it didn't work. I wanted to tip over the tea cart and smash all the cups against the floor. So give up then? I replied. Darius just looked at me helplessly. I don't know what else to do, he said. We didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he reached over and took 2 cups. Come on, they're playing a Jurassic Park marathon. He wandered off, his teacups and carton of popcorn balanced under his chin. Maybe I should just follow him. Even if it was a prison, It was a pleasant enough one, full of hundreds of interesting things to do, with a huge downside of being terrorized by 3 terrifying monsters, of course. I thought of old mother, alone in her room, wondering why her family had run off on her. Or would she just forget? The brain fog never made me completely forget old mother, though. Just a sip of a drink or a smell of my crocodile toy would make me think of home again. I imagined it. Old mother with a faint blurred memory of us that would attack out of nowhere like a knife. I couldn't do it. I had to go home. I couldn't leave her alone. Something moved under my feet, interrupting me from my thoughts, and I jumped out of the way, looking down. That damn dragon again. It wasn't moving in a smooth dancing way like it had done previously. It was traveling across the floor in stiff, awkward movements, jumping and jerking. The head quivered to and fro, and something in its mouth glinted. My heart lurched with terror. Was a white hand going to reach out? A horrible smiling face leering up at me as it dragged me to my doom? The dragon made a hacking sound like a cat with a fur ball in its throat. Then it spat something out at me and I ducked. The silver blade clattered at the floor. If I hadn't gotten out of the way, it would have hit me right between the eyes. Unlike Rawhead, I don't think I could survive a knife embedded in my skull. With shaking hands, I picked the knife up off the ground. It was covered in brown, grainy gunk that looked like molasses and had a motor oil smell. The dragon was frozen beneath me. The knife had messed with its locking mechanism, and now it stood with its mouth open for me to slip inside. All that trouble with the key when we could have just jimmied the damn dragon door open with my switchblade. Confusion surged in my chest. Could I step into the dragon if it was on the floor? Could I just fall through the corridor and crash into a pile of broken teacups and hot tea at the end? Might as well give it a go. I pushed the tea cart into the creature's gaping maw. My stomach lurched and my head span. I was standing upright in the red velvet hall. The tea cart in pristine condition. Not a single cup out of place. Looking around, I saw the ceiling yawn above me. It made me feel dizzy and I closed my eyes, shaking my head and turning back forward. Ahead of me a curtain twitched and a white hand stretched out. It shook one of its fingers in my direction. "Naughty, naughty," cried a strawberry ice cream voice. "Trying to get out again, are we?" "No," I replied. "I just wondered if you wanted a cup of tea." There was a pause and the hand disappeared into the curtain again. Regina stuck her head out, staring at me with a blank expression. "Okay," she said. I rolled a tea cart over to her and she peered at it with confusion. "What do I do?" she said. "You take a cup and you put some sugar and milk in it if you want," I replied, motioning towards the top shelf with a milk jug and sugar cubes. She stuck her hand right into the jug and pulled out a palm full of milk that poured through her fingers. "Oh no, not like that," I said. "Do you want me to show you?" Regina nodded, staring at the tea cart with interest. I got her a cup and put a sugar cube inside, picking up the milk jug and pouring a bit in. "That makes more sense," Regina said as I passed her the cup. I got myself a cup too and then said, "Can I sit?" Regina nodded again. We sat down in the red velvet corridor cross-legged in front of each other. "I didn't get you or the brothers' names," I said politely. Regina smiled at me, watching closely as I sipped from the cup. She mirrored the movement, and tea squirted out through her teeth. Naming everything is a peculiar human trait. We don't partake in it ourselves. I felt a shiver go through me. Not human. Of course it was obvious, with their strange silver eyes and bizarre manner, but still to have it confirmed made cold fingers go up and down my spine. "What are you if you're not human?" I asked in a trembling voice. Regina took another sip, the tea running down her chin. "Well, you'd call us reapers," she said. Flash of memory came to me. Darius had a booth table saying, "Or we're in limbo and Regina, Rawhead, and Bloody Bones are Grim Reapers or something." A strange expression shifted in Regina's face. "I used to reap human children," she said. "Poor, sweet, innocent children. I took them to whatever lies beyond, took them from their loving families, took them so young when they had so much to live for. I remember one day, I was whistling a merry tune as I danced into the sea. I turned around and saw dozens of children had followed and were drowned around me. I slowly recognized her expression. Her face was full of guilt and shame. The brothers took adults to the beyond, she said. They always tormented you creatures, and I thought, no, no, no. They need to learn to be good and treat the humans with kindness. I just want to bring your poor souls happiness instead of misery. I just want to say sorry for all of you I've hurt. I remembered what else Darius had said. Maybe it was a trick, and if you ring the number, you agree on a mass suicide of you and whatever family you bring. I felt sick to my stomach. Are we dead? I said in a tiny voice. Regina's mouth fell open. Oh no, she said. No, no. You're just humans I picked at random. Maybe bringing you joy will make up for all the misery I've wrought on your kind. The porcelain cup was hot in my hands. I remembered again what Darius had said. Maybe the other scary freaks around here are all right, too. All this time, Regina was trying to be good in her own demented way. She wasn't human and didn't know how to make us happy. Didn't know that she was actually terrifying us, making us all scared out of our minds. I needed to make her understand. I didn't want to upset her. I stared into my teacup, trying to find the right words. But we'd all be happier being able to go back home, I said finally. I've met heaps of people here and lots of them say that they're scared. They feel like they're in danger. They feel like prisoners. If you're bringing us happiness, it's only temporary. You're still making us miserable. Regina's silver coins glinted, her face a frozen mask, her cup clutched in her hands. For a moment I thought she was going to throw the hot tea in my face or claw at me with her nails. Then I saw a vicious brown liquid leak from her eye like a teardrop. All I do is hurt, she whispered. Her hands were trembling, spilling tea all down the front of her dress. A part of me thought I should reach over and pat her hand comfortingly, but the stronger part felt like it'd be like patting a vicious snake. I think you're a good person, a good reaper. Good thing, I said uncertainly. You can't spend all your time beating yourself up. You need to get on with your life, existence, whatever. I don't think you need to be so sorry. You were just doing your job. Kids die, you know? There has to be someone to take them to the other side. Regina threw her hands into the air and I shrunk back as the cup smashed on the wall, tea flying everywhere. What was I doing? Trying to talk sense into this dangerous creature, a creature with the goddamn ability to reap my soul, deliver me to the afterlife. I don't want to reap, she cried, the rusty brown liquid rolling down her face. I can't stand it, but what else do I do? I tried to catch my breath, tried not to whimper with fear. Can't you do other things? I said. I mean, you could come down to Earth and run a shopping center, or be a dance instructor. You're really good at that. Regina just wailed. Around her, the walls of the velvet corridor began to shake. I felt the floor rumbling beneath me. Outside the dragon's mouth, I could hear confused and frightened shouts as if the whole shopping center was hit by an earthquake. What about the brothers? She said. I heard the sounds of crashing and smashing glass from outside in the shopping center. I can't take them to the mortal plane to torment the humans, and I don't want them to go back to reaping again. Maybe that's what you need to do instead of reaping, instead of forcing people to stay here. I said over the thunder of panicking footsteps, trying to run to safety. Maybe you need to teach the brothers to be good, but you can't do this anymore. It's not helping anyone. The ceiling was folding up like paper. Regina just sat cross-legged in front of me, blank-faced and staring as the walls disappeared around us, the floor shrinking and revealing grassy sand beneath. I could hear the crashing of waves, smell seawater on the air. We were sitting on the beach. I looked around. The house was gone. Just a hill remaining with grass blowing in the wind. Dozens of people were dotted over the hilltop and across the beach, looking around in a confused daze. On the gravel where the taxi had dropped my family off what seemed so long ago was a big pile of luggage, bags, and suitcases all thrown together. Regina was staring at me, strawberry blonde hair trailing around her face in the breeze. "You'd be a good reaper," she said. "After death, humans need comfort, a sympathetic ear, someone gentle and understanding to lead them to the next life." I couldn't find any words to say, not able to process everything that had just happened. "If you ever want to be a reaper, come and find me," she said as a smile slowly stretched her mouth wide. "Some reapers are born and other reapers are created. It's a simple procedure, really. You need 2 special tokens inserted into your body to become one of us." I stared into the 2 silver coins above her smiling mouth. I put a trembling hand up to my eyes. She smiled wider, all her teeth shining white. "Oh, yes," she said. "You'd have your human eyes removed." Then she stood up in one unnaturally smooth motion, gliding backwards across the sand. "Friends, friends," she called, her voice booming loud like the intercom back in the plastic flower. There was a confused muttering from the people around the hill and beach as they turned to look at her. "It's time," she said, throwing her hands in the air, tossing her head back. "Time, dear mortals, to go on home." There was more bemusement from the crowd, everyone exchanging looks with one another. Then there seemed to be a collective shrug and everyone began to search for their luggage among the pile. The brothers walked up to Regina, flanking her sides. "What are you doing?" Bloody Bones demanded. "Why are you letting them go?" Regina clutched at her chest in a melodramatic way, breathing in heavily. "Because it's the right thing to do," she proclaimed. "The humans should be free." Bloody Bones' face worked with fury, and he grabbed her roughly by the shoulder. "What about the unlimited special blood you promised?" He screeched into her face. "Special blood? You promised." Rawhead gurgled on Regina's other side, knots of hair stuck in his throat. "I need to go back home to think," said Regina, gesturing at the ocean behind her. "Maybe I'll be a dance teacher on the mortal plane. Maybe you 2 can become janitors. You'll get a lot of blood and hair that way." Bloody Bones was motionless. His arms fell loosely to his sides and he just gawped at her for a few long moments. His talon-like hands worked violently, and I thought he was going to slap her across the face. "You're a fucking idiot," he said at last. Regina ignored him, turning to me with her unsettling fixed smile. It was her idea of a friendly look to make her beloved humans feel at ease, but she just couldn't pull it off. She twirled a finger around and I saw golden tracks being dragged over onto the dirt road, clicking together. Carts folded up from the tracks, waiting for people to take their seats. "They'll take you all back to the mortal plane again," she said to the crowd. "Don't look back now." She turned from me, flexing her shoulders. Her hair was joining up with her dress and her nose was stretched into a snout. Whiskers grew from her cheeks as her teeth turned sharp in her mouth. She was growing taller, thinner, and longer, her arms and legs disappearing smoothly into her body. She started wriggling on the spot and then she took off into the blue sky above us. A dragon with an orange and pink mane, a white snarling face, and a rainbow underbelly. There was polite clapping from the watching crowd of people. "Marvelous! 5 stars!" said Uncle Abe after her. "I had a great time," called Uncle Casper, clapping his hands like a seal. "I'll definitely be recommending this place," said my mom, squinting against the sun. The Regina dragon danced across the sky, rainbow scales alight, the stream of her mane like a burst of fire. Rawhead was gagging and flapping his huge meaty arms in the air. Bloody Bones' neck was twisting around, stretching like a string of chewed up bubble gum. Their noses began to grow and mold and morph into beaks. Yellow feathers were sprouting across Rawhead's skull. Bloody Bones' suit was transforming into ruffled black feathers. Their legs creaked and cracked as they hopped on the spot. Finally, they stood before us in their natural forms. Bloody Bones, a black vulture. Rawhead, a yellow-headed vulture. They took to the sky together, flying after the rainbow dragon. Lola, her head reattached to her body, slithered across the sand. She smiled at me and she didn't look so nightmarish anymore. Just a lovely woman with her eyes back in the right position, sparkling hazel and her hair a regular length down her back, waving and blowing me a kiss. She flopped into the water as a burst of moths scattered across the sky. I watched as the creatures all began their journey to their mysterious home beyond the sea. The carts all rumbled and started to move across the tracks away from the hill and the beach. People began to put their luggage into them, climbing inside. I went over to the triplets, Uncle Casper gathering up the luggage. Darius wandered over to me. I took his hand in mine and we stood there silently. Ahead of us, putting her suitcase into a cart, was Lucy, her chattering parents already having taken their seats, paying her no attention. She looked around and sent us a thin smile. A few carts in front of her was Baba Lennox, who turned and grinned ear to ear to us, giving us a big thumbs up. Darius waved back. At the front of the line of carts was Persephone, awake at last with Bernice, resting their heads on each other's shoulders with their arms around each other. "Why can't we get the taxi again?" Uncle Casper was saying with an annoyed look on his face as we climbed into a free cart. "This trolley system isn't very good service." "Yeah, I might just give it 4 stars actually," said Uncle Abe. Mom turned to us with a simpering smile. "Did you have fun, dears?" she said. "Did you make lots of friends?" Darius and I said nothing, not letting go of each other's hands. All I could think about was the tall, narrow city apartment with old mother waiting for us at the front door. I couldn't wait to see her again. I couldn't wait to get home.